The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. As they were coming down from the mountain, the disciples asked Jesus, "Why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus said in reply, "Elijah will indeed come and restore all things, but I tell you that Elijah has already come. But they did not recognize him and did to him whatever they pleased. So also will the Son of Man suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. The Gospel of the Lord. It's kind of a romantic love story that they might even make a movie out of. They've made dozens of movies on the same theme. The guy who was born into a wealthy family and falls in love with a poor girl and abandons all to marry her, and even to the point of getting disowned by his wealthy father and having to work as a simple common laborer and living with his beloved in a life of poverty. That happened to a man by the name of Gonzalo in the days, not terribly long after Columbus discovered America, or at least discovered it in a way that opened it up to exploitation by the Spanish king, thereby enabling Spain to become the ruler of a great empire throughout the world and to become the richest nation in the world at that time, the early 1500s. As I say, not long after the Columbus discovered America. In fact, almost the same time, our Blessed Mother appeared to Juan Diego, which we celebrated just a couple of days ago, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And right at that time was when the young man, Gonzalo, was disowned by his father and married the girl of his dreams, a lady named Christina. Now, there were 3 sons from that marriage. The first one was named John. And he grew up in poverty. When he was a year old, I guess he must have been the 3rd son, because when he was a year old, his father died, leaving the mother absolutely penniless. One of his brothers was very, very sick through all of his life. The other brother died in infancy. Now, this Juan, or John, is the saint that we're celebrating today. So he knows what poverty is like. In fact, he knows what willfully embraced poverty out of love is like, because that is what his father did. Now, John grew up and was not good at laboring, working, as most people see it, but he was very good with the poor. He was very good with the sick. And he was drawn to a religious and a priestly vocation. First of all, actually wanting to become a monk. But it's then very interesting that a Carmelite superior chose him to enter the friary of the Carmelites. and that was a vocation that he desired. But he was also chosen to be part of a group that wanted to reform the Carmelite order. Now, again, a little bit of context of history there, because the Carmelites had become rich and fat and lazy, just like much of the rest of Spanish society at that time, because of the wealth, the exploited wealth that poured in to make from the New World that made Spain to be rich and comfortable, prosperous. And there were some Carmelites who said, you know, in seeking wealth and comfort, we are abandoning God. We are abandoning God. We must seek God in poverty, in emptiness, allowing God to be God in our lives, not seeking a life of comfort. So there were a small number of Carmelites who broke off into what they called the Discalced Carmelites. Discalced means barefoot. That was a sign of their poverty. And they were tremendously opposed by the observant, the mainstream Carmelites, because, well, that threatened their lifestyle. To the extent that John got thrown into prison for an extended period of time, a jail, a cell in one of the monasteries that had only a tiny, tiny window way up, out of reach. And he was there for an extended period of time, treated brutally, almost starved to death. But it was there in that darkness that John began to realize that this dark emptiness was opening himself up by embracing it, by embracing the darkness of his condition. It was opening him up to experience the love of God and to respond to the love of God. One of the interesting things is we all know that Jesus predicted that persecution would come our way if we are his true followers. But we usually look for persecution from outside forces, like the Roman Empire trying to do away with the early Christian church. Today we look to persecution from people that we know hate us out there in the Middle East or in other areas, but they want to do away with us. Where we find it very difficult to understand persecution, and yet this is where it most frequently comes, is from inside of our own, the people that we should be able to rely on as companions, as even soulmates, who misunderstand us and reject us. That is perhaps the most painful type of persecution that there is. That is what perfected John of the Cross, brought being rejected by the people that he embraced as his brothers. That led him to realize that God alone is the one who loves us. God alone is the worthy object of our love. And therefore, he was willing to endure deprivation, endure imprisonment, endure pain and hardship precisely from those that he would have expected fraternity and acceptance, because that led him, kind of purified him to experience the love of God. It's very interesting that in his drawing of the ascent to Mount Carmel, that it's a narrow road. And on that road, he continues to write nada, 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 nada. Nothing, 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 nothing. It is in embracing that nothingness that we find the goal, the fulfillment of our heart's desire, God himself. God tends, if we are serious, if we take him seriously, he tends to draw us to himself by purifying us of all that is not of him. And so as we are experiencing sometimes a very undesirable, unwanted purification in our lives, most of us are here under circumstances and situations that, in the best of all possible worlds, we would not have chosen. It may have been a path chosen for us, or it may have been due to circumstances that we would rather not have had. Nonetheless, whether it's sickness, whether it is abandonment, whether it is emptiness of one sort or another, we are here experiencing something of what led John of the Cross to love. In the opening prayer, the collect, we ask the Lord to grant us, by imitating John of the Cross, that we may come to contemplate eternally God's glory. I think that might be better understood as receiving eternally God's love. Our goal is simply to let God love us and let go of everything else. And so John's example is a good one for us, but even more powerful perhaps would be his prayers. Let us pray to him. Ask him to intercede with the Lord for the same graces for us that God gave to him, to enable him to see total, pure love at the end of our journey.